everybody. Welcome back to the Student Ministry Conversations podcast with your host, Russell Martin and Brent Aiken. We're glad you're joining us today, and we hope you find this conversation helpful, insightful, and encouraging as you continue to lead your students in ministry. Before we get started, we want to remind you, check us out on social media at Talk Student Men on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and our website, studentministryconversations.org. So today we're going to hear a conversation that Brent had with Lennon Noland, and Lennon is the senior pastor at Trinity Church in Waxahachie, Texas, and he joins the conversation to talk about marriage in ministry. So Brent, this was your conversation. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, so today I sit down with Lennon, and I've known Lennon for a little over 12 years now. Lennon was the pastor of a college group that I was involved in while I was at Angelo State University in San Angelo, Texas, called Chi Alpha. And so Chi Alpha is a college ministry that is in universities all over the country. And he was leading the group that I was in at the time. And since then, we have both gone our different ways, but I have followed him and kept up with him throughout the years. And I called and asked him if he would come and join us to have a conversation about marriage in ministry. And so we talk about his marriage, we talk about just the expectations of marriage and the troubles that ministry can bring into marriage with time commitments and constraints and everything else, and how you can work to combat that and be there for both your family, your wife, or your spouse, and then also make sure that you are there for your congregation as well. And so great conversation. Can't wait for you guys to hear it.
All right. Well, it sounds like it's going to be awesome. So without any further delay, here's Brent's conversation with Lennon Noland.
All right. Hey, guys. Welcome back to Student Ministry Conversations. I am one of your hosts, Brent Aiken, and I am sitting down today with Lennon Noland. And so today, it's a privilege for me because I've known Lennon for a while, and it's kind of a opportunity for us to get back together. Lennon was a college pastor for me when I was in college, and now he is the pastor. He is a senior pastor at a church, but I'm not going to go into too much detail because I want you to tell about yourself. So tell us a little bit about you, Lennon, what you're doing. And then obviously with our topic today of marriage in ministry, I would love for you to talk a little bit about your marriage. So take it away.
Okay. Yeah. Well, first of all, it's awesome to be talking to you again. I was talking to one of our former staff member from those years at Angelo State University, who was also your small group leader, Heath Miller. And we were just talking about you, man, and how you were just one of those students that had it a little bit more together than most from an early age, and so clear your organizational giftings, and we love you and remember you and your bride fondly from that time. So that was so cool. But yeah, I was in campus missions for about a decade and a half, Angelo State University. Then met my wife, Crystal, a couple of years into that, started that ministry as a senior myself and as a senior in college myself. A couple of years into that, vocationally met my bride. And all together, we were at Angelo State for about 6 years. Then we pioneered a ministry at Duke University. We're there for a few years before being invited to come back and lead the campus ministry. You, of course, know this, but the fellowship was called Chi Alpha. And so we came back to oversee Chi Alpha for kind of this region of Texas, and served with the fellowship for a couple of years as kind of a chief of staff after that. And now pastoring a church here in the metropolis of Waxahachie, Texas. Waxahachie, go ahead.
Gotta love Waxahachie.
You got to love the Hatchie, man. It's kind of the southernmost suburb. I think the last town you would consider a suburb of Dallas. But yeah, Crystal and I have been married for 15 years now. And we have three little niños, 13, 11, and 10. And so life, marriage, and ministry, man, we're doing it. We're enjoying it.
That's awesome. And I'll pay you later for the comments about me being good in college and all that fun stuff.
I'll take it, but it was a free will, my friend.
All right. Well, so that does kind of transition into our first kind of topic at hand with marriage and ministry. You said that you started ministry, and I think a lot of people don't have the luxury of being married and then getting into ministry. I think a lot of times you're in ministry first, and then you find your bride, like you said, and
Pretty common.
then like you have to deal with what that brings. And so how does marriage change ministry?
Yes. Well, I guess first, just the simple statement that it really does. It really does change ministry. The demands of ministry on a marriage are pretty unique, as you know. And so that makes it incredibly important that whenever you find someone you want to spend your life with, either there's an understanding of a shared mutual call, and that's not always the case whenever you meet somebody. Ministry might not have been on their radar if it was already on yours, but there really has to be, as much as possible, kind of a wide-eyed understanding of what we're going into together. And so marriage does change ministry. One of the first realizations I had of that was one day there at Angelo State, planning a lunch with my bride, Crystal, and we met in the student union to have some Chick-fil-A, right? And while I'm on my way over there to meet her for lunch, we're probably married a few weeks at this point. I invite a student to join us, and so we walk in and sit down, and it was fine. We had a good time. But she said later, I was looking forward to lunch with my husband today. That's what I was after. It's like, oh yeah, so you were. So it really does change things. And just one of them is simply, you have to concern yourself with the bride of Christ and your own bride or your own husband. And I think that that's something that we can see hints of even with the Apostle Paul, in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, when he talks about a single man and a single woman, they can be fully devoted to the will of God. But a husband or a wife has to also concern themselves with the desires of their spouse, not only needs, but desires. And so that is something, Brent, that I think is important to just admit and embrace, that there's an added degree of complexity whenever you're married in ministry. And that's not a bad thing. It's not bad. It's just different. And I think that whenever we expect it to sort of be the same, we just have someone to come home to at night, that can be something that can bring a little frustration into the relationship.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, I think, as you said, you kind of have to lean towards the mindset of like, not necessarily separating your time, but you have to make sure that there's intentional moments that you bring back home to your family, just as much as there's intentional moments where you are away from your family and you're doing ministry.
You really do.
But I think there's great opportunities for occasional merging of those two things as well. Like you said, sometimes your spouse might be called into ministry with you, and sometimes they might not be. I've definitely met a bunch of people that were husband and wife serve on the same staff, and they're a part of the same church, and they both like use their gifts and use their skill sets to do the church. And then there's others that you might marry your spouse and you might be in ministry and your spouse is in a completely different field. It doesn't mean that they don't have a heart for the church. It doesn't mean that they have a passion for like bringing people to Jesus, but like, as far as like their profession, they have other desires and other, like you said, other desires and other passions to follow as well.
That's right.
But we as the church also are really, really good at one thing, and that is putting expectations on married couples, especially when one of them works for the church. And so what are some unforeseen expectations that can that a church can put on you or put on your marriage that might be helpful, might be hurtful, like just what kind of like throwing some, hey, look out for these speed bumps down the road?
Yeah. Well, I think it would probably be, whenever we speak of the church as a whole, it would probably be a lot to expect that the general attitude of the church, that they're kind of thinking of you and your marriage health. At least in my experience, the church isn't going to think a whole lot about your marriage and your family. Now, there are definitely going to be some wise, experienced people that love Jesus in the church that are. But one of the things we have to be aware of, by and large, one of my friends who has been married for, 40 years or so, grandkids, all of that kind of stuff. She said something to me once. She said, the thing you have to know about the church is it'll take as much as you can give it. It'll take as much as you will give it. And it won't necessarily stop asking for more. And so the way that can manifest through people is, there are some old stereotypes that sometimes are still assumed, which is, well, of course, if a man is going to be a minister on staff, his wife is going to play the piano and sing. Like, of course, that's going to happen. And that assumption, it may be old school, but it is also still out there. Or simply that the bride, by default of being the bride, is going to be the catch-all for everything the preacher doesn't do. Certainly she will do. And whenever we've been pastoring this local church here in Waxahachie for just a little over 2 years now. So we were in it for all of 3 or 4 months before COVID hit and all that weirdness that we've all walked through. But we definitely had to have some clarifying conversations of who Crystal was and who she was not, and what could be expected and what should not be expected. And one of the things that kind of came to her was she really was expected to administrate the whole church. And for that to be the case, she leads worship for us and has a part-time portfolio at the church. But I don't know if her ambitions will ever be to be full-time at the church. And I don't have those expectations of her. But we had to clarify with some people, like, no, she's not going to do everything you want her to do. So sometimes those expectations really can be there. And as a family, you just have to be really clear. You have to state things and you have to restate things. One of the funniest things I ever heard, Brent, that I really appreciated, talking about what we were referencing earlier, that there can be a shared vocational call to ministry, but it's not always there. And so one of my former pastors was sharing a story with me about someone he knew that was interviewing at a church to take the position. And toward the end of the interview, when it was clear they would like him to come and be their pastor, he asked the question, how much are you planning to pay my bride? And they said, we didn't discuss that. We're hiring you. And he said, I know, I just wanted to make sure you remembered that. And because he was trying to free her up of some burdens he knew that could come. So as we talk about that, don't at all want to be cynical, Brent. Just, we've got to know, as married people in ministry, it will be up to us sometimes to come alongside our spouse and to make it clear to people who aren't going to be thinking that way necessarily. Hey, she's not me, or he's not me. I'm serving in this role.
Yeah, it's not a package deal. You don't pay for me and get her to.
Right. Bless you.
Hopefully we'll edit that out.
Yeah.
But so with that, yeah, no, I totally get that. And there's, and as a matter of fact, both when I was moving back into this area where I am now in Abilene, I didn't come to Abilene having this job. And I think it kind of goes into our conversation. I met my wife in college, actually, while I was at Angelo State. I met my wife in high school. We were dating and moved into college. So technically we were in college together at Angelo State. And then we got married while we were at Angelo. And then I took a ministry job, and basically my wife followed me for roughly 7 years. And it was just one of those things at my last church. She very much was like, hey, I've followed you. I want to do things with my life as well. And it had to come down to that conversation of like the ministry you have is great. The town that we live in, I mean, like, we've been here for a while, but like, I don't see opportunities for my career and my passions and desires to blossom here. And at the time, she wanted to jump into behavioral therapy and work with special needs kids. And that just wasn't a thing in our town. And so, like, part of that conversation also with marriage and affecting ministry and everything like that is sometimes there's compromise. I stepped down from a perfectly healthy ministry because my wife was like, hey, it's time for you to follow me.
Wow.
It's time for me not to be like the person that's kind of behind. Like, let's make sure that like I get to follow what I want to do as well. And so I said, okay. And so we actually moved to Abilene without me having a job. And so I looked at a few different churches and applied at a few different churches. And in the interview process, one of them was like, hey, I expect you to be in the office 40 plus hours a week. I expect you to be at every football game. I expect you to be at every soccer game. I expect you to eat lunch with the kids at school a couple times a week. And I was like, no. And I mean, fortunately, God's gifted me with a pretty adamant and bold figure is where I can, I'm not afraid to tell people no. And I flat out told him to his face in that interview. I was like, this isn't going to work. Like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And I left the interview, and it was, I don't think it was in a negative light that I left or anything like that. I was like, just, we're clearly not on the same area. And the biggest problem with that was I don't want to step away from my family that much. Like, I cannot commit. Yeah. I cannot commit to being at every football game, every basketball game, all that, because it's not healthy for my family, and my family comes before this job.
Right.
And so I think that's something important.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Go for it.
It is. Well, no, just one of the things you said was so important there that you described. And I realize you're condensing probably a lot of conversations into that story, but was the fact that you were communicating and talking about it.
Yeah.
And so one of the generally the major source of frustrations in any marriage almost always comes down to unfulfilled expectations. And so that's the case whether you're talking about disagreements over money. There's probably unfulfilled expectations over communication, over intimacy, over how the calling in ministry works itself out in your marriage. And so the fact that you guys were talking about it and not simply assuming or living with a simmering frustration is tremendously important. And as you guys, as your kids get older and all of us move into different phases of life, working on the marriage and talking about the marriage and not just about the kids or about the ministry is tremendously important, so that you guys are working out a life that you're sharing together. And that's it. Whenever you said the vows, you said them for one another. And so that commitment is tremendously important.
Yeah. And I think marriage and like your life with your spouse is a forever evolving thing. I don't think you ever reach this like point in your marriage. And I mean, like you said, you've been married for 15 years. I've been married for 12 in May. And it's just one of those things like I don't think there's been a stretch of 2 years where it's like, oh yeah, it's the same. Everything's working out fine. Like, it doesn't just stop. Like every single year, every single new experience, new adventure, new anything, like there's new opportunities and new moments to step in and figure out. But like you said, the primary thing is you have to communicate with each other. And if you don't have a strong communication foundation in that marriage, unfortunately, there's really not much hope for it going well. And I hate to say that because communication is really like, it is the foundational element of a relationship outside of God. I mean,
yeah. Well, isn't it the book of Amos that says, can two walk together unless they be agreed? Yeah. Like, no. Yeah. Like if you're not agreed by definition, if you're not agreed on a direction, by definition, you're not walking together. So yeah, that's absolutely true, Brent, and wise.
Yeah. And so and I'm kind of going to go back to the unforeseen expectations, and this might be an answer and it might not be. But were there any unforeseen expectations that the church put on your marriage that were helpful in the long run?
I would say not. No, no, but that's not to diss my church or the bride of Christ at all. It's just those who we minister to generally. Our marriage and the health of our family isn't on their radar. And so that's not to say that the ministry, I'm not sure about the expectations of the people, but that the ministry is not good for our hearts, and for our own walk with Jesus. One of the things that we're devoted to with leading our church is also just to lead a small group of people ourselves, a life group, so that we never get to the point where we're so organizational and oversight oriented that we're not in the weeds actually discipling a core group of people ourselves. And so but that's good for us, in a sense, the neediness and the messiness of discipleship, and for us to be loving people and praying for them before we go to sleep at night. So I don't know that that's exactly answering your question. The church isn't thinking about us, but I never want to communicate that living out this call and serving these people isn't something that it can take, and it can cause tension, but it can also keep our life for Jesus really vibrant. We have this mission that we share together, whether she's full-time at the church or not with me, she loves these people.
Yeah.
And she's devoted to discipling these people with me. And that's been a wonderful thing to share. I really, really love it.
Well, and I think there's beauty in that too, because yes, we as staff members at churches, yes, we're oftentimes called to be the one, like, not necessarily, we're not called more than other people, but we often kind of get assumed that we're the ones that are discipling everybody, but that's everybody's goal. Like, that's everybody. Yes. As a Christian. And so, like, even if your spouse isn't on staff and has no desire to, like, be the worship leader or children's pastor or whatever, they still should have a desire to be involved, hopefully. And they should have a desire to be in ministry situations with you fairly regularly. My wife definitely brings a lot of the ministry setting into her classroom. And she definitely works with kids and teachers and families all the time that I love. Like, she'll come home and she'll like, hey, someone asked where we go to church. And I'm like, like, there's nothing that makes me happier when she tells me those things, because it's like she is being that light that I know she is for Jesus, even when she's away from church. It's not because she's married to me. It's not because that I work for a church or anything like that. It's because my wife loves Jesus, period.
Yeah.
And so like, when you're both doing that, I love the aspect that y'all do the small group together, because that just shows that you as a family are dedicated to bringing people to Jesus. It doesn't mean that your wife needs to work 30 hours a week at the church, but both of y'all have the same ministry mission mindset, and y'all are both following what Jesus said with the Great Commission.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so too. And again, on this communication piece that we were referring to, if you don't share, and like I said, my wife has a bit of a vocational call in the sense that she's our worship leader, but how that develops forever, I don't know that she'll ever be full-time at the church, but how that develops for any married couple, I think, is making it clear to your spouse that, hey, I don't expect you to be any like specific mold of how your service to the body of Christ works out. But then to help identify those giftings in them, affirm what they bring to the table, the very grace of God that he has given them to steward among God's people, and cherishing that and honoring that and pointing that out, like, no, the whole church of Jesus here that we're serving is better because you bring that to the table. And particularly for some spouses who maybe like your bride teaching, or somebody that works in the medical field, or just a stay-at-home mom that's like, this is my great work. I can't do a million things at the church, but being encouraged on what they do bring to the table in their giftings is kind of a unique opportunity for the spouse to do for them. that is where they may sometimes carry a bit of a burden or a sense of unnecessary guilt for what they're not doing at the church.
Yeah, no. And, but on the other side of that, one of the things that I love talking about, like not having my wife in full-time or part-time ministry as a staff member, is I totally love that my wife has unique skill sets that are different than mine. And
Yes.
I cannot count on one hand realistically, I can't count the number of times that I have gone to my wife for advice on something that I just really, with the ministry mindset of like, how do I get past this? How do I minister to this person? My wife, being the special education teacher, can come in and be like, well, have you ever thought about it like going this way? And it's like,
Yeah, that's
awesome.
Awesome.
Like, no, I would have never, ever thought about that. And so like, it brings unique and specific skill sets to the table that you probably wouldn't have had in your own.
Absolutely.
And so I think communication's awesome, but ultimately you in marriage, you're ultimately striving to make the other person better. Like, it doesn't matter what you're doing. It doesn't matter what field you're in, what you're involved in outside of your professions. Like, at the end of the day, I believe that marriage has to be based off of communication, which we've said a bunch, but then also a commitment to like helping each other be as best as they can be. And there are some days where I don't want to be as good as I can be. Like, and my wife's like, all right, nope, come on. Like, you gotta get this thing rolling. And then there's days that I do that for my wife as well. And so, you have commitments, you have communication, and everything like that. But for I definitely see this as a hurdle for especially younger marriages. After you hit a couple years of marriage, and if you get past that and you're kind of moving into your later years of marriage, this seems to be something that you learn. And unfortunately, sometimes a lot of marriages learn this like the hard way, and then they come back to it later. But for the younger marriages, as marriage and family life evolve, how do you prioritize commitment? Not only to like your spouse, but how do you also prioritize commitment to like ministry, and like, how do you separate commitments and honor both, I guess would be my question.
Yeah, that's really great. Even just the fact that, you have certain things that are priorities, because if everything's a priority, then nothing is, if nothing's priority, you're just living chaos, always trying to put out fires or respond to who is most disappointed in you, whether that's home or the church or wherever you feel the greatest need is. I would say one of the things that really helps prioritize things appropriately is settling on a conviction level what is most important, what can we give our time to, and what can't we, and just realizing, like, you can't give every single night of the week to ministry, and you can't keep your family so busy that you're giving every single night of the week to ballet or karate. This is our life, right? Ballet, karate, we've got dance, hip hop dance, all this kind of stuff. And so what we've had to do is whenever we have open nights in the schedule, like guarding those like really fiercely. And what that often looks like for me is turning down an invitation to drop in on someone else's life group or to do something in particular, because like if we don't prioritize and schedule our family, it may sound unsexy, it may sound unloving, but if you look at the church calendar in my office, stuff is written down across the wall. Like, I'm trying to get increasingly good at knowing what is coming and what the demands are going to be in a specific season. I need to prioritize my kids and my wife with the same intentionality, and why not more so? Because if I botch it with them, who cares if I'm succeeding at church? And so those are incredibly important things. And one of the best pieces of advice I ever got, Brent, that if I want anyone to take something away from today, something really practical, is it may have even been while you were a student at Angelo State. It was early in our marriage. And in college ministry, the fall semester, in deer season, you hunt deer. In fall semester, you hunt freshmen. And so you're out all over the place. You're trying to be kind of shock and awe. You're just anything you can do to meet someone new on campus, you're doing. Well, that was our busiest time of the year, right? And so our first time to walk through that as a married couple, it was I remember that being kind of overwhelming to Crystal. She was like, wow, is this how every year, are we not going to see each other for the first 6 or 8 weeks of the school year? Is this how it goes? And that was really, I think that was our first significant challenge in marriage, was navigating that super busy, intense season of ministry. Because what that looked like for us, also kind of wearing an associate hat at the church, Sunday mornings church, Sunday night church, Monday night college ministry, Tuesday night worship, Wednesday night church, probably a leadership meeting somewhere there, Thursday to Friday, and then you're starting it all over again, right? So I was talking with one of my mentors, and I was like, Gary, how do you even survive this? And he said, keep something on the calendar. And I said, okay, so what do you mean by that? He said, always have something on the calendar for you and your bride. And so now it would look like us and our kids, because there are seasons where you have to sprint, but nobody can sprint forever. And what the calendar does, having something on the calendar, you're communicating like, this is a really demanding time and we don't want to go overboard, but we have to work while it's day because night is coming where no one can work. There are certain seasons that you don't get back, but I love you so much. And we are going to get away for a weekend, or we are going to go out this Tuesday night. This is us. We're prioritizing us. And for me in my marriage, that has been the best piece of advice functionally that I've ever gotten, because we have embraced a life of ministry. A lot of the opportunity to minister comes outside of work hours when people are available to be ministered to, right?
Yeah.
And so because of that, it's easy to squeeze out any opportunity just to be Brent and Lisa. No, you got to be Pastor Brent, all the time. So us keeping stuff on the calendar is huge. Like tonight, we're on a Zoom call, so you can see behind me suitcases, right? Crystal's birthday is in a couple of days. We've been in a very busy stretch with a whole lot of stuff going on. So tonight we're dropping off the kids with the grandparents, and I'm taking her down the road to Waco for an overnight. But we realized to make it happen, we have to do this on a Thursday, Friday, because the weekends right now are incredibly busy. So keeping something on the calendar really helps keep some priorities straight. Yeah,
no, that's great. And so I like the mindset of scheduling and prioritizing. And so this might go into some good ideas and it might not, but this is the question that came to mind. So like when you do prioritize and you put yourself on the calendar, especially with your spouse, like what are things that y'all do regularly as times of like being together? I know that like you talked about how you calendar like time, like y'all are going to go do dinner or date night, whatever like that. And my wife and I, every Tuesday evening after the kids go to bed, that is our, like, this is us time. That's cool. Yeah. We might play board games. We might play, we might watch a movie together. We might, just sit and talk. I mean, who knows? So it's like, okay, I know without a shadow of a doubt, like I'm not going to do anything else that night. But like, and so like I said, ours would be like, we're big board game players. And so like, we like playing a bunch of board games. We do watch movies and stuff like that. But like, what does y'all's like prioritized time look like? Do y'all typically go do dates, or do y'all have other things that you like prioritize into your normal life routine? How does that look?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And as you have figured out, I know, and probably a lot of people listening know, is that it looks different in different seasons, right? And so whenever we were trying to plant a ministry at Duke, that was probably the most difficult time we've ever walked through, or it might be a close second. It was a real challenge. And one of the challenges was, we're across the country, no family, no friends, very little money, with 3 babies. And so, we had a 3-year-old, I don't know, a few month old, and then our youngest, a surprise adoption. And so all of this happened within like the first 6 weeks of moving across the nation, right? And so at that time, we had nobody we could trust as a babysitter. The idea of a let's go out somewhere date night was thoroughly laughable. But in the sense that you're describing, Tuesday nights after the kids go to bed, we found what we could commit to and we committed to it. So some of our fondest memories are putting a blanket on the front porch and eating takeout after we had laid the kids down to bed. And now, truthfully, this is unsolicited advice, but trying to have a bit of a family rhythm at home and having it not be chaos and sort of anything goes also allowed us to have those calm minutes because life as a whole was so incredibly demanding. The fact that we worked with our kids to get them to a place where we could put them to sleep and go sit down in the living room together was a tremendous win. And so in that phase, it looked like that. And now whenever we have a 13-year-old in the house and our kids are older, we can go down the road and grab an early dinner on a Friday if we want to. And they're eating pizza right here. And we've got neighbors and we can do that. Hope that didn't make somebody think I'm a terrible dad. I don't know. But now we can do that. And we also have nights of the week where, we're going to pop some popcorn and watch The Office or something together. So things like that, calendaring this trip to Waco, periodically we try to get away, just the two of us, that's kind of what it looks like in different phases. Now we have the privilege of living in proximity to grandparents. That hadn't always been the case. But if you have that and you can, take advantage of it and try to make it as regular as you can, because especially with guys, we can tend to get on such autopilot and assume things are fine until we are surprised in some sort of dramatic way that they're not. And usually those kind of big moments come from kind of habitual or systematic regret. It's very rarely the big wall that you hit. The big wall that you hit or the crash that you have is usually the result of not sustaining healthy habitual things over time.
Yeah, that's good. That's real good. And I totally do agree with the find babysitters, use grandparents if you have to. Finding that opportunity for you and your spouse to get out is important. But then I think there's even another aspect of this that we can kind of touch base on. And sometimes that's not necessarily time that both of y'all can get away. I've noticed one of the things that really, really comes in my time is in our season of marriage that we have had, and it's been something that we've done for pretty much our entire marriage, is there's sometimes that my wife comes home and she just looks beat. I mean, she just looks like the weight of the world is on her shoulders. And I'm like, the last thing you need is to handle 3 screaming, fighting kids right now. So you either go take a bath, go do whatever. And so how can you, I guess another conversation to kind of have in this is, how do you make time to sacrifice for your bride as well, or your spouse?
Yeah, I love that. That's Miyagi level marriage wisdom too, my friend, from someone who's been married for 12 years. It's incredibly important, and nobody's going to enable that but you. Right? You are the only one who can give her permission to do that. I say give her permission, not in a commanding sense, but hey, don't even feel guilty about this. Take off for a while. And what I found, because I'm all about that too, what I found is that the crystal I get whenever I sacrifice on that level is happier and healthier than if I had just let her push through. Yeah. And so she does the same for me periodically as well. And those are tremendously helpful because, marriage and family life can be all consuming because it's the great work in a sense of our lives. And so, but we still are people that Some people like golf. I don't, but we are still the guy who likes to golf or play basketball or go hike or paint or whatever, and allowing each other the margin to go do those sorts of things. It keeps us interested in each other. It keeps us more lighthearted about life. It's invigorating to come back and re-engage with your family after you have had some not making your spouse feel guilty about it. I've heard some guys, you'd think they were 7 years old if their wives want to go out with their friends and they're trapped babysitting their own kids, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a hard life, babysitting your own kids. But kind of like, what am I supposed to do? Or texting their wife, calling them, what are we supposed to do for dinner here? It's like, bro, you are a grown man. Like, let her be out with her friends and come back. Like, you can do this. I believe you can be a dad.
Yeah.
And so I've just seen that a lot. There's a little bit of an edge there, I guess, but I've seen that a lot. So I like what you're talking about there, allowing the occasional guys trip or girls trip. And again, supporting it, not kind of deep breath and, well, all right, I guess. Because your spouse gets no rest if you do that.
Yeah.
If they leave with an eye roll or with you looking frantic, you're actually not, you're putting a huge weight on their shoulders while they try to get out the door.
You're making them stress more.
Absolutely.
Because if you don't feel like, or if they don't feel like you have the situation when they leave, it is the typical mom to worry. I mean, like, and
that's
so
right.
When you allow that, like, it's super, super difficult. In April, my wife is going on a weekend, retreat with another church in town that she got invited to go on. And ironically, I think they might be going to Waxahachie. I'm not sure.
Oh, that's cool.
And so, but like with this retreat though, like, she's like, no, like she always is like, oh no, well, I can't leave you for a weekend. I'm like, go. Like, we're not going to set the house on fire. We're not going to do anything bad. Like, but she knows that like I am more than capable. She knows that I can handle it. And even with all those even with the confidence that she has in me of like handling the kids and stuff, there's sometimes that I'm like, look, I know that you don't want to take a break, but I'm like, kind of like you said, you're kind of giving her permission, but it's almost even sometimes to the sake of like, where you're almost more like commanding, like, I know you don't want to get away, but you need time. You need to leave just for a little bit.
Yes.
If you don't want to be gone for more than 30 minutes to an hour, that's fine. Totally fine. But do not come back within that 30 minutes. Like,
Yeah, it's great, and it really is smart. The payoffs of it are higher than you can ever imagine. Like if you're a guy and you've never tried this, like, do it and watch what happens. If you're a girl and you haven't given permission to, like, hey, go out tonight with your friends, go hang out, I've got this. It really is.
Go play around the golf, do whatever.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, I think that's super, super important. And if you're not married, take notes, like set this as an expectation early in your marriage. Don't wait till you're stressed out beyond belief with kids and everything else that goes on in life. Don't wait till the fires are raging for you to try and put them out. Have preset expectations of like, I am going to give my wife this time away. It might not be every week. It might not be a set, like every 10 days, my wife is going to go out with friends or something like that. But like, you need to intentionally set moments to where they can go out and not feel guilty about it. And that's before you have kids, after you have kids. I mean, just period. I don't think there's ever a time that you will come in your life where your spouse will not need time away eventually. But I think it definitely needs to be more when you have more stressful situations at home, especially young kids. And if you are a husband right now, or you are not married, and do not have kids, note right now, if your wife stays at home with the child, your responsibility is you take the child when you get home. Because
you gotta be really ready to help.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like I don't care how difficult and busy your day was, because if you come home and tell your wife that you were too tired or too busy to take care of the kid that she's been handling all day by herself, I'm just going to save you the arguments. Like like it's going to happen. And like, I didn't really plan on this conversation going into kids too much, but I think kids are a pivotal part of most marriages.
They are.
So, and I think we'll probably have another conversation down the road. Russell and I were talking about doing a conversation about having teenagers in your own ministry. But we'll probably hit that on a different day. But like, in all reality, like a big part of marriage is when you have kids in your home. And so you have to set up the expectations of when you don't have kids, when you do have kids. And the thing is my wife and I, even though our kids right now are 9 and 6, we are already looking to the future of, okay, so how are we going to process this when they're teenagers? Like, what is a way time for us going to look like when they're teenagers? Well, they're going to be out of the house more because of practice and stuff like that. So maybe we can prioritize some of that time to do date nights and stuff when they're at like baseball practice or games or whatever. Maybe we can prioritize some of that, or like things that we don't need to be at. We can prioritize that time. Or like you said, hey, as they get older, we can say, hey, we're going to go down the street and have dinner.
Right.
We can't currently do that due to we foster currently. And that is one of those things that you cannot do. You cannot leave your foster child unattended. But like, that is something that we definitely have conversations about. And I think it's a continuous conversation that needs to happen because that just shows that you're prioritizing your marriage and your time together just as much as anything else.
Right. And it's good. It's good for the kids to see. Yeah. It's good for the kids so that nothing affects them more than the dynamic between their mother and father. Yeah. And so keeping that vibrant and joyful is huge.
Yeah. No, fantastic. Let's see. So, I guess, and this might work well, this might not. But I wanted to do kind of, as we're kind of rounding out the end of this episode, I kind of wanted to do, if you have any last minute, like, hey, here's some marriage advice or tips. Doesn't have to be big, ginormous paragraphs or anything, but I'm talking like proverbial marriage wisdom. If you have any of those, maybe we can spitfire some back and forth just on a mindset of that, and then we'll kind of close out this conversation. I'm not saying that you or I have all the answers, because I mean, collectively, we have not been married more than my parents. I mean, so we definitely do not have I'm not saying that we have all the answers, but I do think that you definitely learn and experience different opportunities to grow as you go through different realms of marriage, and ministry can be super, super difficult sometimes. So proverbial marriage tips from Lennon Noland. Let's go.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll make up the first two based on just the wisdom in what you just said. Number one, have wise people that you look up to in terms of marriage and family. They should not be your age. They should not be 5 years older. But not that we can't learn things from friends that have good marriages, because we absolutely can. But I'm saying have some heroes who their lives have been tested. You see the fruit of them. If you're looking for people to help teach you, in terms of parenting, don't look to a beautiful couple on Instagram that, they have a toddler and a 4-year-old, and they've been married for 5 years and are still keeping the fire burning. And so they're giving tutorials. That's great. You can get the best advice from that couple that's been married for 5 years. But let's get advice from people. Jesus said wisdom is proven by her children, right? So let's look at the lives of people and see how the fruit of the way that they have lived their marriage and raised their kids works out. So just like when we're parenting, we're not looking to raise good kids. We want to raise good and godly adults. We want to raise good kids, sure, but that become great adults. That's what we're after. And so whenever we look for marriage heroes, let's look at people who are further down the road. They've raised kids that are godly. They are old and they still love each other. They don't speak about each other with contempt and frustration. Those are the people to learn from. That's one. So have people in your life. And number two, don't stop working on your marriage. We joked a little bit about guys here, but we tend to, you've heard the old joke, right? I said, I love you on the wedding day, and if it ever changes, I'll let you know. That's stupid. That's really stupid.
Yeah.
Like in your marriage, if you stop trying, you start dying. And so you never get to the point where you don't want to be doing some occasional marriage check-ins. And so Crystal reminded me of this the other day. She said, actually, this used to mean a lot to me. I think it'd be good for you to bring back when we go out for an anniversary or something significant. I would say, so how are we doing? Just how do you feel about our life, about our marriage? And is there anything we could work on? And I think I learned that lesson because at one point in our marriage, Crystal goes, hey, maybe we should read a marriage book together. And my instant response, Brent, was, really? and I remember she sort of teared up. She was like, why is that dumb? Well, to me, I laugh because things were fine. Things were fine. And so sometimes we can just operate on things are fine instead of operating on how do I make this great?
Yeah.
And so off the top of my head, those are two things. Never stop learning.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I'll even add a little tidbit to your first one about finding people that are married, that have been long-standing married. You don't have to look too far. Especially with this geared to like talking with pastors and student pastors and children's pastors and people in ministry altogether. I would almost guarantee that there's a couple that you can look at in your church. There might not be many, but I guarantee you there's at least one.
Yes.
Specifically in our church, there's quite a few that I can look at. We have a couple in our church that have been married for 70 years.
Wow.
And it's just like, man, like I tell people all the time, like we had a lot of people when we hit 10 years, like they congratulated us and said, oh, that's such an achievement. And I'm like, no, that's not an achievement. That's an expectation. Like 70 is an achievement.
Yeah.
Like I was like, that is something that that is something that you strive for. Like,
yes. So there was a couple in San Angelo. You might have met them. Do you remember Andy and Becky Dixon? Andy was a really tall old man, really big guy.
I remember the name.
Good guy. But whenever I was getting ready to marry Crystal, and I'm having conversations, I'm seeking wisdom, right? And one conversation after another, it would be kind of a deep breath and love is a choice and marriage can be hard. And I get that, but that's like all I was hearing, And I talked to Andy one day. I was in the foyer of the church and I said, Andy, everybody is just telling me how hard marriage is. Like, I think I believe that it can be hard, but I just want to talk to somebody that still seems like they love their wife. And he goes, Lennon, marriage is great. And he meant it, from his heart. They ran their race well. Andy's with the Lord now, and Becky is still living in San Angelo. But that was so good to hear. So I started paying attention to them.
Yeah.
And then my pastor, he made the statement because I had that same conversation with him. And he said, you have to know that no marriage should feel like that all the time. He said, and you have to know that every marriage will feel like that sometimes.
Yeah.
Like that was also wisdom that I'm not going to get from someone that hasn't been married for decades.
Yeah. No, and I think there's great truth in that. If you expect marriage to be a cakewalk, you're going to be disappointed. But if you expect marriage to be miserable, you're going to make it that way. It doesn't work the other way around. Like if you expect it to be miserable, it's not going to be great. Like whatever you set in expectation is going to happen. But it doesn't, just because you expect to have a great marriage doesn't mean that there won't be rocky moments. It doesn't mean that there won't be moments for things to fall apart, things to potentially be a little frazzled, but you prepare for those with the expectation that you're going to have a strong, Christ-centered, God-fearing relationship that's based on communication. And so, no, I mean, I think largely time and time again, if there's any nugget to take out of this, and this, I guess, would be my proverbial thing, would be, and we've hit on this so many times in the time we've been talking, is you have to communicate. If you do not communicate with your spouse, you are on a road to destruction. You may never see that road. Because just like you said with your wife saying, maybe we should read a marriage book. You're like, what? I mean, everything's fine. Fine is a very relative term. If you see fine, that doesn't mean she sees fine.
That's right.
Or if your spouse will not always see the same thing as you. And so, man, I think that's a goal for everybody of like, how are we doing? How can we, like, what are we killing it at right now? And we do a youth pastor lunch where we would meet with the community youth pastors, and we do 2 questions every single time we meet. And it says, what are you killing it at right now? And what are some things that you're struggling with? All the different youth pastors answer, but in all reality, that's a great marriage question too. What are we killing it at right now? Like when we look back at our marriage, like right now, what is the thing that like, we're just like, man, like this is as good as it gets. Like it cannot be better, kind of thing like that. Like, and we feel really, really pumped that it's like going that well. And then there's always another side of it though, that has what are some things that we might need to maybe not even work on, but maybe put a little more intention towards?
Yeah, it's true. 2 other bullet points. Do we have time for them?
Go for it.
2 other things. One, I would say, talk to God out loud together, like pray out loud together. That there's something about that. And here's the truth. If you're not currently doing that as a couple, it may be surprisingly awkward for reasons you can't articulate for someone who's in ministry to do, but push through that and talk to God out loud together. There's something that happens when you're taking your marriage, the situations you're facing, your finances, your children to the Lord together. At the end of it, when you say amen, you've submitted things to the capable hands of God. And you've done it together. And as we go toward the Lord together, we do become closer. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. And so doing that together can give such confidence in spiritual initiative, seeing that in your spouse. Okay, they're taking our family to the Lord. It's huge. So talk to the Lord out loud together, and don't neglect physical intimacy. Talking about happiness in your marriage. I don't know who said this. My friend shared that he had heard it like 20 years ago, but it all stayed with me before I was married. And a guy said this, sex does for your relationship with your spouse what prayer does for your relationship with God. And I didn't hear it unpacked, but just thinking about it, just like spending time in prayer, you generally feel more connected to the Lord throughout your day. When you make time for physical intimacy, you generally feel more connected with your spouse throughout the day or the next day or whatever. And so, unsurprisingly, physical intimacy is also an area where communication should be needed. Don't be afraid to have those conversations. Talk about it. Try to become a skillful lover. I promise your spouse has opinions on what they would like to see more of, or what non-sexual interaction would help the sexual relationship be stronger. And so that's something that we should openly talk about as well.
Yeah.
Because here's the truth, Brent. You have one outlet for a romantic relationship in your life. And what's amazing is even in marriages that are having difficulty or feeling entirely unromantic, of course, that is when we are very susceptible to temptation to do what? Pursue illegitimate romantic or pornographic outlets.
Yeah.
And so let's keep the fire burning within our own home.
Yeah.
And let's seek to have a vibrant sexual relationship. It just makes everything better.
Yeah. Well, and to kind of end with the mindset of let's change the statistic, because the statistic of like 1 in 2 marriages end in divorce nowadays is heartbreaking. It's devastating. But the thing is that 1 in 2 means that a lot of pastors and a lot of ministers are doing that too. And as much as we don't want to say it or see it sometimes, there's a lot of eyes looking at us and how we are handling ourselves and how we are handling our family and how we are handling our relationships. And a lot of people look towards us for their own, but then a lot of people look to point fingers as well. And so the thing is like, we have to do, more than like, just as much as like modeling Jesus, like we're supposed to model Jesus through our family. We're supposed to model Jesus through our relationship with our spouse. We're supposed to model Jesus through everything that we do.
Right.
And let's work to change that statistic, because like it's heartbreaking. I can't believe that we've ever become a society where it's gotten to that. And I'm not saying that all divorces aren't legitimate. I've definitely seen some instances to where it's like, when there's abuse or stuff like that on the line, that's a completely different conversation. But
right, that's right.
But there's so many that just are give ups. So many that are like, I'm done fighting. I'm done trying, or we never really tried. We just thought this would be easy, kind of thing like that. And like, don't fall into the lie. We've said that marriage can be the best thing in the world, but you are going to have bumps. So prepare yourself for them, support each other through them. And then, man, fantastic stuff. I do have 2 more things. So outside of this conversation, where can people go to get help, whether that be resources or maybe like videos you can recommend, Bible studies, whatever?
Yeah. Well, on a crisis level, Brent, I think I would want to slip in, like if you need marital counseling, go get it. Like, go for it. You may think, I can't afford that. It would be embarrassing. You can't afford a divorce. Invest in your marriage. Cancel Netflix. Do whatever you have to do. If you need counseling, go to it. I promise you may be at the end of your rope in thought, but a wise counselor who loves Jesus, they have seen people in your situation probably multiple times this week. Like there's hope if you'll be humble enough to go get it. Secondly, I would say keep reading, keep learning. A great book that I'm reading right now that's awesome is called Cherish by Gary Chapman. Do you know who he is, Brent?
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's 5 love languages, right?
Wait, you know what, dude? I just said Gary Chapman. That is 5 love languages. Why am I dropping the name of?
That's a great book too. I mean, like if you want a good book about like finding how to communicate with your spouse, 5 love languages is a fantastic book.
Yeah, 5 love languages is absolutely masterful. So Gary Thomas is, of course, who wrote Cherish, Sacred Marriage. But his premise of that book is that the most neglected word in the vows, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, all of this, he says, is the word cherish. That is the uniquely romantic element of that vow. And then I would say just YouTube a guy named Kevin Lehman. You may have never heard of him before. He is just an old Yoda of marriage. He is absolutely masterful in the advice he gives on marriage and physical intimacy, tremendously helpful.
Okay. Man, perfect. I'm writing those down so we can include them in the show notes later. If you didn't hear it, they'll be on our website under Lennon's episode. So you can go to our podcast and podcast page, studentministryconversations.org, and you can check that out, as well as blog posts, articles, and all the other episodes. And then, I think both of those are good. I was racking my brain, man. The only other book that I can say that I've read, I guess, when it comes to like relationships and marriage, I mean, I think this book gets a bad rap because a lot of times when you reference this book, they're like, oh, like, I'm sorry, your marriage is in a bad place, like kind of thing like that. But honestly, The Love Dare The Love Dare is a fantastic book. And I think it's just as important of a book for you to read before you get married. As when you have a healthy marriage or when you are beginning to see potential struggle points in your marriage. It is a book that you can pick up and probably try to jump through at least once a year. Because it's just constant challenges for you to go out of your way to be selfless towards your spouse. Right. And in all reality, sacrifice is one of the big like parts of marriage. Like you sacrifice yourself and like y'all are working on being each other, like being together instead of just me and my wife kind of thing like that. So very, very good stuff. So yeah, I will, like I said, I'll have all these in the show notes. And then finally, the last thing, Lennon, is we do have some people that do like reaching out. So how can people find you on social media? If you are an old school emailer, you're welcome to just throw out an email, whatever you want to do. How can people contact you?
Yeah, no, I'm really pretty invisible on social media. I do have a Facebook that I post on that account about once a month, something church oriented, but yeah, I'm on there. That's about the extent of it. I suck at that, Brent. I really, really do.
It's all right. And then the only other thing is a lot of people, especially when it's youth pastors looking at other pastors, let's throw out your church. So if people want to look at your church website and stuff like that, we normally try and throw that in there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're part of a family of churches here in the Dallas, Fort Worth area called Trinity Church. And our branch of the Trinity family, we're Trinity Church in Waxahachie. And so our website is abysmal, but you can find it. And, our messages and everything are on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, all the places you can listen. And I just referenced that because we did just do a series on marriage called For Better or Worse that would be pretty recent in the feed. And I would encourage that. I think that those messages could be helpful.
I personally have listened to all of the sermons from that series, and I can't recommend it more. It is a fantastic series. And it was one of the big deals. One of the big reasons that I wanted to have Lennon come on this show is from the time that I was in college, just meeting Lennon to now. Lennon, you are a brilliant communicator. And like you are very, very easy to listen to. And I think that is a very dynamic resource to have as a pastor. And so
praise the Lord. Thank you, Brent.
With that, you should definitely go check that out. Trinity Church in Waxahachie. I'll have their website and maybe their Facebook link in the show notes. You can go check that out. But
don't make fun of us, guys. It's bad.
If there's any web designers that want to throw Lennon, no.
Yeah.
No, but so yeah, that's it, man. Lennon, thank you so much for being on the show. I love your heart, love your family, and just thank you for being you and your dedication to all you do.
Love you too, man. Please say hello to Lisa.
Yeah. And so that comes to the end of this episode. We will see you guys next week. Hope you all get something from this episode and that this helps you as you grow students in your realm. So see y'all later.
Well, I'm so glad that Brent brought us that conversation. Thank you so much for doing that. And I'm so glad that you who are listening joined us today. And I hope that you found this encouraging and inspiring, and that you found tools that you can use as you pour into your marriage and your family and into the lives of your students.
Yeah, if you enjoyed this episode and found it helpful, we would ask that you leave a comment and a rating on whatever platform you're listening to us on. We would appreciate that so much, as it gets us up the ratings and up the channels, so you can find the podcast easier. That helps other people find it, and then also just helps us get the word out about the podcast that we're doing. So take a moment and share that, but then also you might know someone who would benefit from this conversation. Take a moment, share this with them on social media, tag them, but then also tag us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook by using @TalkStudentMen. We would love to be tagged in these posts as you share them, so we can kind of keep up with who's listening. Also, you can now support us financially by doing a monthly support option that is located on our website. And then you can also purchase merchandise. We have some shirts available for merchandise up on our website, studentministryconversations.org. All of the proceeds from that come back to the podcast to let us have better equipment, to help us have better software and better processes for making the podcasts, providing transcripts in the future, and everything in between. Now, Russell, you have next week's episode. What do we have in store for next week?
Yes. Well, I'm excited. Next week, I get to bring you a conversation with Colleen Russell. Colleen is a youth director in East Texas, but Colleen also was in my youth group when I was in Texarkana, and she was one of my key ministry leaders as a high school student. And then she went on to be a summer youth leader and a ministry assistant for our ministry. And so I think together, Colleen and I have done ministry for 5 or 6 years in different roles. And so we're going to talk about what it means to take that role of ministry assistant. When you're not the key person in charge, but you are taking care of a lot of the critical things that happen. How do you do that? What are some of the tools you can use to stay organized? What does it take to fill that role and do it well? And so maybe you have a ministry assistant, maybe you're looking for one, or maybe you are one. But I think this will be a critical conversation, and I hope you find meaning and value in it.
Man, that sounds great. I can't wait to hear that conversation. Just a reminder, be sure to go to studentministryconversations.org for show notes and links from this episode. We also have helpful blog posts and different articles and freebies and stuff like that up there. And so you can check that out. We'd love for you to see what we have on there and support the podcast as well. And so again, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next week.